The Atheist Debates Patreon Project presents End Boss Debates Review. Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. This is a kind of quick review of the first End Boss. I'm going to put debates kind of in air quotes because it's not a true regular style debate format. For those who aren't aware, I do live programs on a YouTube channel called The Line. On Sundays, I do the Sunday show. For several hours. It's a live call-in show, particularly focused on theists. So they call in and try to defend their beliefs, and we have conversations and arguments, and sometimes it's just awful. And sometimes it's absolutely wonderful. In addition, I do another show on Wednesdays. But on that same network, we created something called End Boss. And it was in part an inside joke because a number of my debate opponents from Modern Day Debates and other places seemed to view me as if I was the end boss of atheism. Like, oh, I've just got to go get that Dillahunty guy. And I get it. I've done a lot of debates. I run Welcome to the Atheist Debates channel. I can see why people might think that, but my view was always that I was going to be focused on the subject and not the person. I've talked about this before, about how on many occasions I haven't done any research on who my debate opponent is or what their positions are. And it's because I didn't want to prepare for the person. I wanted to prepare for the topic. Unfortunately, that resulted in a couple of really, really bad debates where we were engaging with someone who even in some cases had a tenuous grip on reality. And so first of all, I want to thank William for agreeing to be the test case for End Boss. He had booked a debate on another channel that wound up falling through, and this was one step in trying to make up for that and see if we could have a discussion. He really wanted to have a debate on the bodily ascension of Jesus, and maybe we will have that as a full, proper debate, because one of the things that we're doing on The Line is we're constantly trying to make improvements and adjust the format. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the episode of End Boss that we did, what went right with it, what went wrong with it, and what we're going to change. And we are still taking applications for it. You can go to qnaline.com, and from there, there'll be a link to apply for the debates. One of the biggest goals was to have a way of vetting folks for debates, finding good debate opponents. This is not we're going to pick the easy one, or we're going to pick somebody who's really bad or whatever. The goal is to have good conversations. The goal is to have someone who's a reasonable representative of their beliefs, so you're not going to put them on the air and then, every other theist of their, group is like, oh, you picked the worst one, or you picked something that's awful. We don't ever want to do that. I don't want to be engaged in straw men in reality or in fiction. So finding a way to vet opponents was important. There are debate channels, and because the focus of a debate channel is just debate, that means they have to keep finding new debaters and new topics, and that's just not going to happen, which means we keep going over the same topics over and over again. And it also means to take almost anyone, because if they can get someone to show up and a couple hundred people to maybe tune in and watch it, post some comments, get some super chats going, then all of a sudden they can get clips out of that, and that's their revenue stream is the debates. And it means that you're going to have uninformed and occasionally just outright irrational people arguing about pretty much any topic you can imagine. Now, we at The Line had the opportunity to include debates in different formats without the channel being dependent on debates. So we get to be a little bit more selective. The planned format for End Boss was to target 1 hour, because there was a suspicion that the modern brain is so used to 30-second things that a 2-hour or a 2.5 hour or a 3-hour debate, which I've done on occasion, is just too much. By the time it's over, everybody's exhausted. You can barely remember all the points that were there. The people from one side tend to leave with the same view. The people from the other side tend to leave with the same view. It was, perhaps at best, a thought-provoking evening that might have changed someone's mind slightly on something. And so the first thing I wanted to do was to try a 1-hour format. The format that we came up with was a 5-minute welcome, introduction to the In-Boss show. We're going to describe the format, introduce the challenger and the position they're defending. And then the challenger gets 10 minutes to present their case for their position. Rather than a huge topic that is going to, we're going to rabbit trail off into 4 or 5 different topics, the goal was to keep this focused. So every challenger comes in with a proposition that they are defending. And that's all worked out ahead of time. Nobody gets to say, I'm going to come in and defend the bodily resurrection or the bodily ascension of Christ, and then show up and say, you know what, today instead, I think I want to talk about what is a woman. You don't get to do a bait and switch there. So they get 10 minutes to present their case, and that's when the channel will start potentially screening calls, taking questions from the audience. This is all about giving the challenger an opportunity to focus in and present the best case for their position. This is followed by a 5-minute period, and it could take less or slightly more. All these times are rough approximations, but this is where whoever the end boss is, it's their job to now steel man that position and try to get agreement. And so the end boss should be taking notes during their presentation, and it can come down to very simply, so your assertion is that Jesus ascended bodily to heaven, and the justification for believing this is whatever the justification is. And if you successfully steel man it, that means now we're all talking about the same thing. It also allows whoever the end boss is to rein in questions from the audience that try to go off in different directions. If you wanted to have just open discussions about everything, call the show, call the Sunday show, call the Hang Up, any of our call-in shows. You can do that. But if we're going to focus on a debate, we want people to be ready for that. And so once the position's been steel-manned, the format then went to 20 minutes of questions that the end boss selects from super chats and calls. Basically, audience members have their questions about this topic. We're going to do that for 20 minutes. And then the challenger faces 10 minutes of direct questioning from the end boss. The end boss controls the time for that section, asks the final questions that the challenger will face. And this section can include counter arguments and challenges from the end boss that aren't actually questions. Then the challenger gets a 5-minute closing statement, and then there's 5 minutes of wrap up. That format is going to have to be modified. We talk a little bit about what went well in this debate. You can go over to the Line Network and watch the debate. William understood the format and did what he said he would do, and he was respectful and easy to work with. So kudos to William. The production side of things went great. The graphics, the audio, the tech stuff, and the timing. We actually stuck to the timing really well. There were a handful of things that didn't go so well. I will take full responsibility for virtually all of these. The structure needs some tweaking. And most people felt that the end boss section at the end was just too short and didn't push back enough. We didn't feel as much like an end boss as let me clarify things. And that's completely fair. That's basically what happened. Part of it is my fault because I lost track of how much time there was going to be in this section. And I think with an additional 30 seconds, I could have pushed back slightly more on key elements, but I didn't want to break the rules that we had set up on the timing, especially when William is being so good about the rules. It would have been very easy to say, first of all, what reason beyond the testimony, beyond the biblical account, do you have to accept that Christ was bodily ascended to heaven? And the other things to ask would have been like, why is the bodily ascension even relevant? What's the point in defending something like that? What difference does it make? And if you are a believer in this, if you found out that you didn't have good reason to believe in the bodily ascension, would that change whether or not you're still a Christian, a Catholic? And the bigger one was, what other things presented with similar evidence do you reject? You reject the claims from other religions, things like that. If your standard of evidence is such that you find this compelling, if you were to maintain good standards of evidence, you should also find these other things compelling as well, and you don't, including competing claims from other religions. We touched on some of those, but it missed the back and forth, and it missed the pushback that I think it should have had. And the other thing that was on what didn't go particularly well is that the audience questions that were coming in were almost all the same. It was very obvious right from the start. People want to know, what evidence do you have beyond the Bible? What evidence do you have beyond the Bible? And it's the great and obvious question. It was the first thing that popped into my head, and it popped into a bunch of audience members. And so we had repeated questions. It probably would have been better after the first one got asked to sideline all the other questions that were similar and try to bring in more questions that were slightly different. So what we're going to do is make a few changes to the format. Instead of a 20-minute question from the audience section and a 10-minute in-boss section, the first instinct was to reverse those, to make it 10 minutes of initial questions from the audience and then 20 minutes that. But it's hard to do the format, and it's hard to process all those questions just to get a handful in early. So instead, what I think is going to happen is right after the challenger presents their case and we spend a few minutes steel manning it, instead of going on to 20 minutes of audience questions, there should be 10 minutes of an end boss initial questions, like round one, or however you want to view it. The end boss thing is a bit of fun, but 10 minutes or so of end boss initial questions, followed by 15 minutes of audience questions, followed by the final 10 minutes of end boss final questions and redirecting, and then they get a 5-minute closing statement. They will get the last word still. That was one of the important elements. I wanted people, there were people who were like, oh, I'm never going to call into the show because you're in charge of the hold button. Okay, I get that. Although I think 20 years has shown that if someone's able to argue honestly and effectively, they still get to talk. If they're refusing to answer questions, that's when we end up putting them on hold. If they're trying to talk over, that's when we end up putting them on hold. But setting aside that, I wanted them to know you're going to get 10 minutes uninterrupted, as long as you aren't, screaming awful things or trying to turn it into something else. You get 10 minutes to present your case. Then you're going to go through a little miniature gauntlet of answering questions. And then you're going to get a 5-minute closing statement to summarize your position, what you've said, what challenges you abated, and why you think your position is justified. And that will be the final word during the actual structure. If you change that and remove the 20-minute question, 10-minute question to 30 minutes total, and take 10 minutes initial questions, 15 audience questions, 10 minutes in-boss questions, then that comes out to that's 35 minutes, but then the closing is 40 and 45 minutes. You can get this with some slight tweaking of the numbers to shift from a 1-hour program to a 1 hour, 30-minute hard stop end time, but with a 1 hour and 15-minute goal. So you get 15 minutes of, floating time in there. But what it means is that instead of, we've hit the last second of the end boss's question period, and now nothing else gets to be answered, even if there was an incredibly important question there, it allows for a little more. Now, don't worry. I am not, the end boss format is neither my preferred debate format, nor is it my preferred format to move debates towards. It's an experiment in how can we do this type of thing better and use it to potentially tweak other things. There will still be, I'm traveling to a debate. I'm leaving tomorrow, actually, to go to Tampa for a debate. And there will be plenty of debates in the hour and a half, 2 hour, 2.5, 3 hour format elsewhere where here's my opening statement and your rebuttal and your opening statement or my rebuttal, and all of those will continue. The structure for NBOSS is a little bit of fun, but mainly to keep it smaller and more focused. What I've seen in many debates is that what we'll end up doing is talking past each other quite a bit and then saying the same thing again, and then saying the same thing again, and then saying the same thing again. And hopefully in a condensed format like NBOSS, that'll keep us from repeating and saying the same things over and over again. So there's future changes coming. We appreciate everybody who tuned in. A huge thank you again to William for participating. And William, if you want to do the long form debate on Christ's bodily ascension, that's fine. If you want to come back on to NBOSS for this or another thing, that's fine as well. But all you need to know is that, or all of you need to know is that we listen to the feedback. We were already kind of aware of what most people were going to think, and we have made some adjustments, and we already have other applicants who have applied. This will not be a weekly show. This will not necessarily be a monthly show. It will happen as challengers meet the requirements. And one of the requirements involves having audio, video, and internet bandwidth enough to make a good quality production. The last thing we need in a short format is technical issues, audio issues, disconnects, choppy, grainy video, and that's what we're trying to do. It may even be possible to do some of these in a live setting where we're in control of all the cameras. And I think a hour and a half targeted debate format with some adjustments could be fun. But again, one of the primary reasons was to narrow the focus and make sure that we're getting better debates, better discussions, and better challengers coming in, and to kind of lean into I'm going to go take the NBOSS of atheism. So if you want to apply, or if you have an interest in being on there, you can go to qandAline.com, and there's a form there to fill out so that you can participate, hopefully, in an NBOSS debate in the future. In addition, the line will also be producing other debates in other formats. This is the kind of fun, game showy style one. And we appreciate everybody's feedback on the first run. See you next time. Bye-bye.